It's an interesting one for us because we're a traditional broadcaster. We've been in this business for 90 years. This is something we understand about how to reach audiences through that broadcast platform. But we are learning to live in the digital age, and we are responding to the changes in technology and the changes in audience habits. And one of the profound changes we've seen in recent years, it is of course a truism even to say this, is the rise of social. So of course we have to be in that space. As a public service broadcaster that needs to connect to our audience, we have to be within the places where our audience live and have their social lives. So that's why they're definitely a partner. They're not the only partners around. I'm a BBC person, so I need to be fair and balanced. Twitter aren't the only social network. We work with others as well because they can help us reach those audiences. Yeah. But the way we look at it is we'll go onto social media and we want to drive people back to our products as well. So this isn't just about consumption of media only in the social space. We also want our products to thrive in that ecosystem.
And Danny, how does it look from your side now that Twitter is actively curating content through moments? Yeah. Does that alter the balance of your relationship with an organisation like the BBC?
I don't think so. We're a business that doesn't buy content and we don't make content. But content is very much, the beating heart of our platform. So the partnerships that we forge with partners like the BBC are all about getting their most premium content, their best content onto our platform for our users to consume. If we don't have their content, we don't have a platform that users come back to every single day. And that's really tough for us because when you don't buy content, when you don't make content, you're not in control of your content narrative as much as you'd like to be. So the only way that we can win the content game essentially is by the strong partnerships that we forge. But I think at a deeper level, no one that we work with is in the content business. I think we're in the audience business, and that's really what we bring to the table in every partnership is huge global reach. Not just us, but social in general. All our peers in this space bring audiences which you can reach now. For Twitter, it's 320 million monthly active users. 800 million plus, when you include the logged out audience, that we bring to the BBC that they can now connect with for the first time, which they probably couldn't have done 10 years ago without, hundreds of millions of dollars in marketing spend.
Mm-hmm. Talk to us a little bit more. I mean, you're head of partnerships for North America, and Twitter has signed quite a lot of partnerships, not with rights holders, but with rights vendors, for want of a better word, with like the MLB, like the NBA. Who are now almost directly selling portions of their content to you. Does that not put you in a far more competitive space with something like the BBC?
No, I think part of that is just about when partners bring their premium content to the platform, there is a revenue component. It's not, but revenue is never the first goal. It might be the end goal. I think audience and exposure is the key. So a lot of our partners really want to just get their content in front of new audiences, engage new audiences, keep fans engaged. So the NBA is a great example. The work that we do with them is very holistic. So it's during the season, it's in the finals. During the finals, it's about converting casual fans to core fans, because that's the first time for the whole year that there's a whole new audience of people tapping into the NBA finals, which haven't engaged with NBA content all season long. And then when you get to the end of the finals, making sure you don't fall off a cliff. So how do you engage those new fans that you've just touched for the first time and keep them engaged with the sport over the off season? And so as part of that, there'll be a revenue component where they'll want to monetize their content, but it's much deeper and broader than just the revenue picture.
Let's talk a little bit more about audience then, because sport, certainly on this side of the Atlantic, and largely in the US as well, has become, in broadcast terms, very much a walled garden. It is now something you pay for, be it Premier League football, be it a lot of international rugby, be it Test match cricket, and that has, I think, been problematic in terms of attracting younger audiences, attracting millennials. Do you think that's a bigger issue for sport or for rights holders?
Well, before I get onto that, I think it is worth testing your assumption there. That, is sport just the preserve of the pay broadcaster, which is what you seem to be saying? I work for a public service, free-to-air broadcaster. I'm not going to agree with that, funnily enough. I think we've still got an extremely strong rights portfolio. We don't, of course, we don't have everything. Once upon a time, pre-pay TV, the BBC and ITV and others in the UK had everything. It's not like that anymore, but we still have a strong portfolio, and we still do connect with audiences through our linear channels in a way that, you know, in terms of mass numbers, that the pay operators, you know, can't. So we're still doing that, and then added to that, we're using our digital platforms to connect with audiences when we don't necessarily have the TV rights. You mentioned cricket there. That's a really good example to me. We've had the Ashes this summer. BBC doesn't have the TV rights to that. And apologies to anybody who isn't a cricket fan in the audience. I'm well aware this is an international group. But in the UK, it's big. And we're able to use the broadcast operation that we do have, which is an extremely esteemed radio program, Test Match Special, and we're able to modernize that by using digital technology, and we have a BBC Live platform that is basically using the best data and the best of social media and the best of our text commentary alongside the broadcast to bring something like that to life. So I still think we do have ways to connect with younger audiences around our traditional sports, but you are right that this is a challenge for millennials particularly, that all broadcasters, all traditional media, and even some of the new media operators are all having to wake up to, that consumption habits are entirely different now, and we need to connect with that age group in a different way than we ever have before. Sometimes that will be taking a traditional sport like cricket and doing it in a new way, but other times it might even be looking at things that we wouldn't even consider to be sports. So we recently did an experiment around esports. We did it in conjunction with BBC Three, which is the big youth brand at the BBC, and we actually broadcast a League of Legends event at Wembley Arena, and we did it live over 4 days, online only, because that's where that audience is, and it was hugely well received by that particular group. We just did it as a trial. This is not a commitment from us that is the future, but I think it's really important that traditional broadcasters start to understand a bit more about how that age group is operating.
Give us Twitter's perspective on that.
Yeah, I think the key here is going back to the audience piece, and in order to reach new audiences, you need distribution. And I think that's really what has changed. You know, we've all heard this many times, that content is king. You know, I strongly believe that, you know, distribution is the new king in that sense. It's about getting your content to the most relevant eyeballs, and as many as possible, and then trying to think about the way to, you know, monetize them. And the thing with the millennial audiences in 2016 will be even more people consuming content on more devices than ever before, in more places than than ever before. So the strategy has to very much be about reaching people anywhere, anytime, any place on the planet, you know, where you can, you know, outside of the current rights restrictions when it comes to sports content. But that needs to be the focus, and I think that's where all the strong partnerships that we forge, and actually all the media companies across the world are forging now, not just with social, but the content business or the media business is all about distribution. And if you're not thinking about distribution or not thinking about additional eyeballs, you're probably behind, because it's, you know, great content is great content with poor distribution might as well just be bad content, because it's not getting eyeballs and it's not getting engagement.
Could we talk about, we're all used to kind of generation after generation of higher definition TVs, and there's probably big things around the corner for that. But in terms of that actual first stage consumption of sport, what do you think the next steps are, Ben? You work for one of the world's biggest broadcasters, and you must see a lot of this at very early development stage.
Yeah, and we have an amazing R&D team who are, you know, trying new things out, working with major operators, whether it's around things like virtual reality or 4K, even 8K, you know, things that are coming to market and are still a way off. So we're kind of taking that long view, but more importantly, I think right now is that, you know, what is on the immediate horizon. So we're looking ahead to next year. 2016 is a big year for the BBC. We operate very much on an Olympic cycle. That's how we have always tended to innovate. But 4-year cycles don't really work anymore, because you see how much has changed. When I look back to London 2012, where our promise was God, I've already forgotten what it was, where we never miss a moment, that's what it was. And you didn't, and we were able to broadcast every sport as it happened on whatever device you had. But things have changed since then, and so what in that intervening 4 years, social has really become a mainstream player. You've got the rise of mobile in a way that we didn't have even in 2012, and the profound change that has for things like short form video. So we're looking ahead to Rio, and for us it's like, what is our promise this time? Well, in a way, actually it becomes, it's almost the 24-hour Olympics, given that it's happening on the other side of the world anyway. And so a lot of the time it's going to be when people in this country would normally be in bed. Now, people will stay up and watch it, but also they're going to be waking up in the morning and they're going to want their hit of Olympics update. So we need to be thinking in a completely different way about that content offer. And I do take your point about distribution being more profound than it has been before, but so is the content offer. So how can we deliver snackable Olympic updates for people on their daily commute? That's the kind of thing we're thinking about.
And Danny, that sounds like music to the ears of Twitter, surely.
Yeah, I think that I talk about this with my team all the time, and that is real-time fan engagement. And it sounds like a catchphrase, but I think it's really important. I think because live sports is what matters most. Well, live is what matters most to the sports business. It's what matters most to the TV business, to the broadcast business. And I think the value in sports rights and the sports business is in that live broadcast window. Sports games on delay or outside that live broadcast window, they don't generate as much revenue. Advertisers aren't as interested in being attached to them. And being able to find and connect with fans in that live match window is so critical, because they're at an emotional high or emotional lows if you're a Wallabies fan. And you have an ability now to connect with them in real time, in the moment, when that's happening, and that is so critical to the sports business in general, because that's when you really can forge strong bonds with fans.
Twitter has just introduced some new, more interactive features, such as the ability for users to generate polls. Is there more in that vein in the pipeline? Is that sense of immersion something you're always looking to increase?
Yeah, I think what we're trying to do with polls and with Twitter emojis, which are little images that appear when you use a hashtag, is surprise and delight. We did that with the Rugby World Cup. And what we see when we launch polls or emojis is we see more engagement, we see more people tweeting. We just released half an hour ago with the Rugby World Cup impression number. Tweets were seen 6.8 billion times on Twitter and off Twitter during the Rugby World Cup. That number, the 6.8 billion number, is the number of times tweets were actually seen. So it's not just some fuzzy impression number, it's actually tweets, real views of tweets on platform. A lot of that is because there were more tweets sent around the Rugby World Cup than we ever would have expected, and a lot of that was to do with the emojis that we launched, the fact that you could do polling towards the end of the Rugby World Cup, and just the great content that all our partners were publishing.
It's really interesting you use that phrase, surprise and delight, and I think that is the challenge we've all got. You asked about the sports industry. It's how do we make this kind of stuff connect with people? You've got to find new ways of doing it. We need a bit of lateral thinking to think about more entertaining ways, particularly to get that core millennial audience. They're not used to consuming sport in the traditional way that the likes of myself grew up with. So how can you make it more entertaining, bring more humor into it, try and do things in a different way? And social allows you to do that. So does the fact that we're in a more visual web now. It is different even than it was 4 years ago. So those are the opportunities we need to take advantage of.
Do you think that's something traditional broadcasters often find quite difficult? I'm thinking of the BBC's Wimbledon highlights show during the summer, which had a pretty rocky time after its launch and had to be reformatted quite quickly. I mean, do you think there's not a real natural facility among broadcasters for that kind of repackaging for different generations?
I think it's a really interesting one, and I think it applies to all creative industries. We have an imperative to take risks. We have to do that. Otherwise, you can't be creative. You need to keep doing that, but you need to also be careful about how you take the risk. And if you work for an organisation at the BBC, like the BBC, boy, do you realise the responsibility that there is when you take risks with really revered bits of programming. And I think it was a relatively rocky period with that highlight show, but actually out of that came a really strong new proposition. So I think risk taking and how you do that when you've got legacy channels that have been around for literally decades and people have grown up with is tricky. And that's why I made the point earlier about esports. We were taking that creative risk in a different place.
Sure.
We were doing it online in a relatively secure area where it wasn't ever going to, frankly, scare the horses in a way that if we'd stuck it on BBC One on a Saturday night and then people would have gone, oh my God, what is this?
Yeah.
So it's about managing your risk, and we have to keep doing it. Otherwise, frankly, we're not going to keep up.
Danny, to what extent do you feel that with Twitter? I mean, you're no startup anymore. You now have, by digital standards, a very kind of established audience that's accustomed to the kind of the rules and formalities of Twitter. Do you sometimes feel, in the same way the BBC might, that it just gets that bit more difficult to innovate in terms of not wanting to scare the horses?
No, I think we're a company that is always pushing ourselves to innovate. I mean, I think what keeps me up at night is, are we allowing our partners to innovate? And are we allowing our partners to innovate quick enough? That's the really tricky thing. I think I've got complete confidence in our company's ability to innovate and continue to try and stay ahead of the curve. I just want to ensure that we continue to empower our partners to use the tools and use the, embrace Twitter and use all, harness the power of our platform to innovate as quickly as possible as well. I think we do a really good job of that, but it does keep me up at night because you need to constantly be on your toes and constantly giving them tools, equipping them with the ability to create new content, different content, get our tools into areas of their business that we might not previously have access to. So we have a thing called a Twitter Mirror, which is a sort of selfie device, which is a content tool that we give to partners, and it gets partners access into things like locker rooms and dressing sheds and team buses and that sort of thing. We have a series of those tools. We have a Q&A tool which we give to partners, which allows them to conduct Q&As with athletes or teams, leagues, coaches. And we have a suite of those tools, but I'm always thinking about what can we do next to keep people ahead of the game.
I think that's a really interesting one. That whole idea of getting the fan closer to it, and the behind the scenes bit. That is an area where I think the traditional broadcast has always been, we're the professionals. We're going to serve this up to you in a very slick way, but there is a natural barrier to that. So how do we somehow get the fans more involved? And I think you can see that in some sports it's a lot easier than in others. And the biggest sport in our country, which is the Premier League, perhaps not quite as easy to break down some of those barriers in a way that we can see. A sport that I look after for the BBC is Formula One, where even when you've got millionaire drivers like Lewis Hamilton, they are prepared to let you in a way that I would say the Premier League, it's not always the case.
Accustomed to.
Yeah. And the other part of it is once all that great content is created on the platform, we're really big on pushing the syndication piece. So how can we empower partners to take all the incredible content that's been published on the platform, user-generated stuff and partner-generated stuff, package it up and get it on their sites and syndicate the Twitter content. So one of the big differences, I think, with our platform, with that of our peers, is that it's all about this open, public nature of the platform, which is anyone can take that content and get it off the platform and embed it on sites. And Moments is one of the things which we launched just recently, which is now empowering partners to tell their own stories around all that Twitter content. One of the big pieces of that is a syndication widget, which allows you to not only just build moments, narratives, but then take those moments that you're building, the ones that our curation team build or the ones that partners will build, and actually embed them on partner websites.
Great. It's been a fascinating discussion. Ben Gallop from the BBC and Danny Keynes from Twitter. Thank you.
Thank you.